Not just me. I look forward to that. In fact, I love being able to have a conversation. So I'm going to have a conversation with the lovely, who's a colleague and is our mindful parenting expert. And here she is.
Hi, Helen. Hi, everybody.
I do like it when a plan works.
Well, Helen, when it's you and I, how can it not work?
Well, it's just that we're not in the same country anymore, you see.
I
So I don't
know.
know if I have faith in the time of day or...
I know. But I've been working with lovely parents in Dubai all day today, so I feel like I'm still there, to be honest.
Yes, and we feel like you still are too, which is lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Tell us about that. So I want to say, first of all, to anybody who's watching who isn't aware, Jo and I have been friends for much, much longer than we've been colleagues. We've known each other, I think, since the beginning of our time in Dubai, really, haven't we?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I remember you a long time back. I felt like a
yeah.
young woman back then.
So did I, Helen.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah.
And now you're no longer in Dubai.
Mm,
So tell
yeah,
us
no.
about how you're settling. Tell us about that.
Well, it's been interesting. I mean, I'm jolly glad we came back in what is supposed to be the summer, because it's still pretty cold at the moment and quite grey out there today. But it's strange, isn't it, when you go to a place that is your home but isn't your home? It's a sort of a weird experience, that, because I think people expect you to settle straight back into life. But it's different, and I've been doing my 14 days quarantine as well,
Mm, mm.
which finishes today. Yes.
Oh, really? So it's
Yeah.
today that you're released again. So what's
Well,
that going to
tomorrow.
mean
Today
tomorrow?
is my last day, so
What
tomorrow
will
I'll
that
be allowed.
mean for you?
Yeah, so I'm quite excited about going out into the world tomorrow. Yeah, so so it's been strange to be here and not really see anyone and not go anywhere. That's been quite interesting, but as I say, the lovely thing has been that every day I get up in the morning and I log onto my laptop, and there's all the familiar faces of all the and new parents as well, from all over lots in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and in other countries in the world. So I'm really grateful that we can do that and that I can talk to you like this. It's lovely.
Isn't it astonishing how one of the things that arrived for us out of this whole lockdown experience has been being able to go online and use it in ways I personally would never have dreamed possible.
Yeah.
So now I feel quite extraordinarily familiar sitting here doing it now, whereas 3 months ago it would have terrified me. How do you feel about it?
Yeah. It does feel it feels familiar. And I have to say, I've found that I've really enjoyed working like this. As much as I miss seeing people in real life, I have really enjoyed it. And I've loved the work that we've done in the workshops. I feel that one of the things I've seen is lots more mums and dads have joined workshops together, which has been really nice to have that. And I think what it's allowed, Helen, I don't know about you, but I feel like even more people get the opportunity to learn mindfulness, and perhaps they wouldn't have been able to do it before. So I've enjoyed it. And the feedback certainly that we've had, that I've seen, has been really positive as well.
But what interests me about it is that we've been familiar with mindfulness for many, many years now, using it as the basis of our work. But
Yeah.
I'm astonished at how many people have come to see that, in fact, when life turns upside down and everything becomes unfamiliar, to be grounded in a mindfulness practice
Yeah.
appears to be where everyone is now heading. So when I say everyone, I have to say I'm utterly astonished how many people contact us to say, can you give us a help? We understand that you know about mindfulness in Dubai. We're familiar with Mindful Me in Dubai.
Yeah.
And why are we needing it now? Because there's nothing else that will work for us.
No.
Nothing
And I
else.
love And don't you just love the fact that there's something that you can apply to so many different situations? I love the fact that I haven't got to go, right, okay, so now this has happened, so I need to find a different set of skills to cope.
Yeah.
I always come back, and I often say that to parents in particular, come back to your skills, come back to the practice, and there's always an answer there for you. It's often just, I don't know, I sometimes think for me, mindfulness is like a touchstone that I can always return to. And if I stick with it, there's always something there to help me.
I was having a conversation with someone this morning and said, you know, people are either gathering up the ingredients from their past or they are heading into the future all the time with what might happen. But I want to say to you, work with what you have now, with what's actually here, with the accumulation of your life's experiences and understanding, what you have available to you in this moment. Harness that. And he replied, it sounds simple, doesn't it?
Yeah, but you know, sometimes the most simple things aren't the first things we think we need to learn something new or special, whereas actually we already have it. We just need to return to it and remember that it's always there whenever you want it.
So can you, to help the people who are listening, who will have tuned in to understand we're going to talk about mindful parenting.
Yeah.
Can you help people to understand what it is we're talking about when we say mindfulness, that mindfulness works for me, or being a mindful parent should work for you? Because I think some people will think mindful parenting might sound a bit, what? Is that for me?
Yeah, yeah.
So what does it mean to be a mindful parent? Would be a really...
Yeah, it's a really great question. And honestly, Helen, I mean, if I went back to when I became a mum 25 years ago now, I think if somebody had said to me, come to this workshop, it's called Mindful Parenting, I would have gone, I don't really think that's for me. That sounds a bit new age, you know, a little bit like wishy-washy. I'm not really sure that's for me. So I totally get that. And I think it's about really understanding that it's learning a set of skills that you can then incorporate into your life. And for me, they've been the most useful things I've found in my parenting. And that's why I teach them to parents. It came as a bit of a surprise to me that along my journey, I learned mindfulness and then realized, wow, this would really help me in my parenting. So let's try it out. And I did. And I realized that it was really the answer to all the things I was struggling with. And it was only, and so I started incorporating it into my life and my parenting. And then as I found it worked and as I really practiced it, I then started teaching it to other parents. And I think it's only really been in more recent years that we now find books about it and it's talked about in a more day-to-day way. But that wasn't how it was when I came to it. So I think for me, it's about being able to be present, like be here for whatever's happening as a parent, you know, and that can often be hard because often what's happening as a parent is challenging. I mean, sometimes it's lovely and wonderful, but a lot of the time it's really hard work and can feel really frustrating. And we want to either, you know, get away from it or focus on trying to create this magical moment of happiness, you know, this picture we had where everyone sat around, you know, do you remember that program, The Waltons?
Oh, yes.
I'm not sure that other people will remember, but you know, that program where everybody, there's this lovely family and everybody says good night to each other and everyone says good morning and they all sit around the table. I remember thinking, oh, you know, that's what I want my family to be like.
Yeah. But I remember watching The Partridge Family in the 70s. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And they played music together and they were ever so happy and nobody ever got annoyed and no one ever did anything wrong. And I just thought we should all be like that all the time.
Yeah. And so I think often we go into parenting with this vision of what it's going to be like. And we put so much energy into trying to make it like that. And it might be for very short periods of time. But a lot of the time we just feel really disappointed, you know, and feel like either I'm doing something wrong, I'm not good enough as a parent, or my children, there's something wrong with my children because they don't seem to be doing what everybody else's children are doing or what children are meant to do. So I think there's a lot of expectation. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves and on our kids, and we really miss out on just the day today. I don't know about you, Helen, but I look back and I think, where did the years go? Where have those years gone?
Absolutely. And you look back on it and think, oh, for goodness sakes, it only feels like yesterday, and yet it feels like 100 years ago as well.
Yeah. So it's really valuable to be able to be present for as much of it as you can be, and not just try to spend our whole life seeking out those moments of perfection, because they're not really that often. And actually, I've found often the times we've laughed and the times we've connected the most of a family have been the moments of complete imperfection. I mean, only a week ago, I was here in this house that a friend has very kindly lent to us to live in for a while. And there was no furniture. And I was sat, my youngest son, who's 19, has been here helping me. And we were sat in the lounge downstairs, and all we had in the house were 2 camp chairs and 1 blow-up bed and 1 other bed and like a few pots and pans. And we just sat there. We went, wow, well, this is welcome back to England. Welcome back. And we just laughed about it and just said, this is just so bizarre, isn't it?
Welcome back. This is your quarantine home. There's nothing in it.
There's nothing in it. Yeah. But we, and it's those moments where things aren't perfect, where, that's where you really connect as a family, isn't it?
Yeah. So mindful parenting is about connection, isn't it?
Yeah.
Strong.
Yeah.
I often hear myself saying to people, if you went to do a workshop with Jo, she would say to you at this point, when you ask this question you've just asked me, connect first before you start correcting someone. So I think it's a good way of describing mindful parenting. Yeah. Your connection with yourself and your connection with your children. Yes?
With your children, yeah. And recognizing that connection is sometimes hard for many of us, because when we were children, in our difficult moments, in our big emotions, our parents were not able to connect with us. And so we didn't experience that as children. So then when our children present us with their big feelings, we don't know how to make that connection because it's just not something we experienced.
Well, that's an interesting point. If you say, if our parents didn't mirror this parenting style to us, are you suggesting that mindful parenting means that we're going to have, as parents, learn something new and parent in a different way?
Yeah,
than I think we were.
Yeah, I think for many of us it will be about that. I mean, certainly for me, it's not the way I was parented. I mean, my parents did connect with me, but often they weren't able to because they just didn't know how to do that. You were raised in that era where, if children were naughty, you sent them away. You didn't stay with them in their emotions. You were like, off you go, and when you're good, come back.
No, I remember being told this: wipe that look off your face, young lady, or I'll wipe it off for you with the back of my hand.
Yep.
Smile, be happy. Yeah.
Be happy. What's the matter with you? Everything's good in your life. You should be grateful for what you have. Think of all the starving children in Africa or whatever it was. So often you were made to feel a bit ashamed when you had feelings, and so what we're really understanding now from mindfulness and from neuroscience as well, because I love the fact that these two things really just go together, is that children need support when they're having big feelings. They're not able to self-regulate. They can't calm themselves down because they haven't yet learned that, and they don't have the brain capacity. So our role in teaching our children how to manage how to experience their feelings, how to understand them, and then be able to either calm down or express their feelings, that's a really important role that we have as parents.
Well, then you're teaching a child how to be an adult, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You're teaching children that all feelings are acceptable. You can feel however you feel is okay, which is the basis of self-worth and self-love, isn't it? That I'm allowed to feel things and that there's nothing wrong with me. And I can also choose my behavior as well.
It's interesting. My mind has gone back to the generations and the decades before mindful parenting. When I think what we're talking about is somehow or other we learned to become adults. I guess this is why you and I are both counsellors, really, when you think about it in our training, that we've spent a lot of our adult life learning how to experience our feelings as adults in ways that we weren't shown as children.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's tough, isn't it? So
Yeah.
your mindful parenting is about parenting yourself then as well?
Oh, well, definitely. It's about learning how to practice these things for me, how to learn how to accept my own feelings and not be ashamed of them or embarrassed or try to hide them from people, or try to push them down and pretend that I'm not feeling them in the way that I was perhaps taught as a child. And then from there, once, if I'm practicing accepting all my feelings, I can also accept your feelings. But what I love about it, Helen, is you don't have to be an expert in order to do it with you. A lot of people think, well, goodness, does this mean then I've got to know how to do all of that really well before I can practice with my children? I'm like, no, you're just, your children will teach you, actually. We often talk about, Eckhart Tolle talks about children as teachers. John Kabat-Zinn talks about children as teachers. The Dalai Lama talks about, they all talk about that children teach us and give us the opportunity to learn these things. So you don't have to be perfect at it. You just have to be giving it a go, have a try.
Well, I think that when I'm teaching mindfulness, I often say to people, interchange the word mindfulness for awareness.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, isn't it? Once you start to learn to become aware of what's going on for you and how you're handling the situation, then you're automatically teaching the child.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's your own awareness, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's exactly that. And I think sometimes, Helen, what I notice is once I start to become more aware, what also happened for me at the same time as I was a bit self-critical as well. I become aware and then think, oh, that's really bad. I can't believe I just did that. Or what's the matter with me? Why can't I be kinder? Or so the self-criticism would come, or the guilt would come. And what I realize is we don't grow and improve from self-criticism and guilt. It actually makes us, we're just being mean to ourselves, aren't we? Which is exactly the opposite of what we want to teach. So I think we also really learn self-compassion as well, how to recognize, as I become aware, I don't need to judge that awareness. I don't need to criticize myself or be mean to myself. I can just say, well, I'm learning this about myself now, and that's okay. It's okay.
Yes, so as Kelly's just placed it onto the screen, self-criticism is the biggest challenge I face in parenting. It's interesting, isn't it? When you think of the words, Kelly, you're right. When we say, I feel guilty all the time, or I feel wrong all the time, or I'm not doing it properly, how we hurt ourselves, and then the impact of that on our children. But I think you said just before, this is not the way that you were parented. So I imagine that because you've chosen mindful parenting, because you've chosen to look forward to being much more aware and kind, that your growth would have been exponential too, alongside that of becoming a mum. Do you notice that?
Oh yeah, huge.
So tell me this, when people come to you to ask, or they come first seeking, why do you think they seek the support? Why do you think that parents first come and say, look, I need to come and do a workshop with you, or I need to come and have a session with you? What's the biggest prompt, do you notice, that makes them ask for help?
I think often it's a sense of helplessness, of feeling that I just don't know what to do. You know, there's clearly something not going right in my household, you know, and often it's been going on for quite a long time, actually. So yeah, often it's like there's certain behaviours that are happening at home, that what we would class as naughty behaviours. I just class those as, you know, kids are just struggling, really, and, you know, mums and dads just not knowing how to support that. So I'd say helplessness is a big one.
Helpless. And noticing too, I noticed that parents come and talk about, I'm struggling because I can't regulate my own emotions. I keep losing my temper. I keep blowing up. Or the common thing, do you hear this often? I do nothing but yell at my kids.
Yeah. Or my kids, nobody ever listens to me. That's another one. You know, Jo, can you teach me how to make my children listen to me? Is a big one. I think often it's also where with siblings, I get a lot of parents come where they see that their children are quite unkind to one another, that they can't manage conflict, and that worries them. Anxiety, where parents notice behaviours in their children, and somebody has said to them, perhaps at a school, or a friend has said, I think maybe your child is quite anxious. That really stress, you know, parents feel very stressed about that, because they somehow think it's their fault.
Back to the self-criticism again.
Yeah, back to the self-criticism.
Something I'm doing wrong.
Must be something I'm doing wrong. Or they're worried that their children are not reaching their full potential. You know, perhaps they've been hearing from school that their children are underachieving. That's often why they come. Or sometimes there's a change in the family dynamics. I often have parents who come who have made a decision perhaps to separate, and they want support. How do we carry on parenting our children when we're no longer living together or no longer going to be married? So
so you're talking about parents using consciousness, using awareness, understanding. Do you find that more parents nowadays actually know what they mean when they say, I want to learn to be a mindful parent?
Yeah, I think a lot of them probably would more use, like, I want to learn how to be a calmer parent. Is often a word I hear. I want to be calmer. I think this phrase of being present, I think that's being talked about a lot more. I want to learn how to be calmer and kinder. I want to teach my children gratitude. That's quite a big one. And the other one often is, I think my children have got low self-esteem. I'm worried. I think my kids have got quite low. They don't seem very confident. You know, that's often another reason that they come. And of course, a lot of what parents come with is behaviours. So they bring a list of behaviours that concern them. And one of the things we do is teach them to think about, where are these behaviours coming from? Like, what are the emotions that are sitting behind these behaviours? That awareness again.
Right. So I can hear you talking about children, beginning with babies, going right up through teenage years, yes?
Yeah, definitely, yeah, all the way through.
So what is the age range that you most commonly are working with, Jo?
That's a really interesting question, isn't it? I would say toddlers is often a very common one, because suddenly these lovely babies, you know, become little people who talk back and don't want to do what you ask. So that's often a common one. And then another age is sort of around 6 to 7, again, is quite a common age. It's interesting, because what parents don't realise is often it's at a time when there's a change in their brain development, but they don't know that's what suddenly caused a change in behaviours. Or sometimes a sibling has arrived and that's shifted the dynamics in the house. And then around sort of 9, 10, the beginning of puberty is often very common. And then, of course, adolescence, you know, just coping with this new person. You know, my child, they often say, where's my child gone? Where's my lovely son or daughter gone? Like, how do I get them back? You know,
So Jo, would you be dealing with the whole gamut often? Do you sometimes work with parents and then discover that you're working with their toddlers and now time has changed and now you're working with those kids grown up and being teenagers?
Oh yeah, it's so lovely that. I love that. I mean, I have parents that I've been working with for 10 or 11 years. So I met them when their children were 4, you know, and now their children are 14. Or I met them when they had just had a baby and now their children are just hitting puberty. And so, yeah, parents will often come back. And I love the fact that we're able to offer that ongoing support. I mean, I have parents who have done, you know, for example, like the children, the mindful parenting of children, the age range of that is 4 to 10. So I have parents who came first to that workshop when their child was 4 and then come back again when they're 6 and come back again when they're 8. And then, okay, maybe I should do the adolescent workshop now. I think I'm ready for that. So and they come and they teach other parents in the workshop as well. They share their knowledge, which is lovely.
So just to clarify a point, in case anyone's listening, misunderstanding, you're not teaching the children.
No.
You're not. So can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I do work sometimes with some older adolescents who want to get some support for themselves. And I would say really that would be from around sort of 13 upwards. But generally I would still also support the parents as well, because I'm really keen on ensuring that any support I give is for the whole family, not just the child. But yeah, the focus is supporting parents, because ultimately we're the ones who have the ability to become aware, and children learn best through experiencing a parent who is aware and then practicing that awareness with their children. So it's interesting, isn't it? I have lots of parents who say to me, like, did you teach your children meditation? Did you teach them mindfulness? Or like, have you got like 3 little Buddhas at home? You know, and I laugh because I couldn't imagine really teaching my children meditation. And I think if I maybe tried to do that when they were young, it would have really probably switched them off from the whole idea of it, actually. I mean, they talk about mindfulness, they talk about awareness, and they have their own practices, but that's something they've developed on their own. I mean, my middle son is a police officer, and in the UK they teach them, do you know, Helen, they teach them mindfulness on their training.
I love that.
Yeah, he said he was in his training and they had 2 days of mindfulness, and the teacher was asking these questions, and he said, like, I knew all the answers, and the teacher chatted to him at lunchtime and said, I'm really interested, have you got your own practice? He said, no, but my mom's a mindfulness teacher. So yeah, so they use it as a way of helping police officers have an awareness of when they're stressed or when they're struggling, perhaps. So I think, you know, if you look at the way children develop and the way they learn the best from growing up in an environment where adults around them that they feel safe with are self-aware, are practicing self-regulation, you know, managing their feelings, have the ability to label emotions, like give them names and use those names with their children, and practice responding to their children through awareness. That's how children learn it.
So they need, using the mirror neurons in their brain, they need us to be the mirrors for them.
Yeah.
So I imagine that a lot of people presume that when they come to see you, they bring you their children.
They do, yeah. And it's always interesting when parents make a, you know, and I'll need to bring the children. I'm like, you don't need to bring the children. You can just come on your own, and you can tell me about them. Like, I want to hear about them, and I'm really interested, but I don't need to meet them. You know, you ask me questions about families I've worked with, and I've worked with their children indirectly for 10 years, but I've never met them. I feel like I know them, and often they'll bring me pictures, but I don't ever meet them. Because one of the things I say to parents is, you know, if I work with you and I support you, I can help you build that connection and that relationship with your child that you really want. If I see your child, well, I'm building a connection and a relationship with them from me to them. Is that what you're looking for? Wouldn't you rather learn how to do that for yourself? You know? And they sort of, and you can see people go, well, yeah, of course, that makes sense to do it that way, doesn't it?
And it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you think about it, we've always in our company said, let's start from the top down. Yeah. So if we're asked to go and talk about mindfulness in a corporation, we would actually like to talk to the leaders of the corporation. Yeah. It needs to be top down. So it needs to be parents down, doesn't it?
It does.
So I hope that makes that clear for people, because I know that's a question people often ask me. Do we have to take the children out of school to take them to see Jo? And I say, no, you do not. You go and see Jo, leave the children in.
Yeah, and how lovely that you get to come and sit and talk about yourself for 75 minutes and share your fears and your experiences, you know, and not have to worry about your children listening to that either.
Yeah, rightly so. Yeah. It's interesting. I remember endeavouring to learn about parenting when I was having my children first, when I was really young. But actually we were taught everything to do from the practical side. When I look back now, I think it about, of course, pregnancy and childbirth, but the early years was all practical. It was all about feeding and schedules and the timings, but nobody ever really talked in essence about bonding or about connecting in those ways, about relating. Yeah. So it's astonishing, isn't it, how much this has come to the fore in the last few years, and how it sits in mindfulness, doesn't it? That it sits in awareness, it sits in kindfulness.
Yeah, it's about what you're describing there, Helen, is that the focus was always on doing, wasn't it? It was always on the doing element of parenting. And really what we're understanding is that we also need to have an awareness of the being of parenting, what it's like to be in a relationship, and helping our children to learn how to be themselves as they grow up as well. I'm going to turn the light on because it's got really dark in this room. There's these huge grey clouds have come over as we've been talking, so I'm just going to turn the light on.
I can tell that you're in the UK, Jo.
Yeah. Yeah, that's better. It was getting very dark in here.
Yeah. Well, so that's an interesting point, isn't it? The recognition that one of the things that mindfulness has brought us is the ability to talk with our children from an emotional connection.
Yeah, and just to be able to help our children to recognize that feelings aren't good or bad. You know, they are just feelings, and that they have names, and because we are a species who likes to make sense of things, one of the most important elements of having emotional intelligence, if you want to call that, awareness of our feelings, is being able to give them a name, isn't it? And how important that name is. Because there's a big difference between being sad and being disappointed and being let down and being scared. All of those feelings are totally different.
So it's interesting, when I hear you say that, then I have a recognition that mindful parenting is a great deal of education, emotional education for parents, because they, of course, I imagine, have to understand that they have a limited vocabulary for their own emotions. Yeah. So can you tell me a bit, I'm curious for us to talk about what a person would experience when they come to see you. What's the difference between asking to come and talk with Jo about mindful parenting in a one-on-one session and coming to a mindfulness workshop, a mindful parenting workshop? Talk about the difference between
Good question, isn't it? It's a good question, yeah. So I suppose there's three elements really, isn't there? There's an individual session, and then there's a mindful parenting workshop, and then there's a mindfulness workshop for parents. Okay, so maybe I should talk about those three.
Please,
Yeah.
please,
So,
that would be good.
so I suppose an individual session would really be whatever it is that you bring is what we would focus on. So if a parent comes and wants to talk about, I don't know, say like a behavioural issue that they're seeing, the first thing I would do is ask them, you know, how does it feel for them when they see this? Are they able to recognise in their bodies how they feel? Are they aware of their thoughts when this thing is happening? Because the first thing I'm really looking for is what is their own level of self-awareness. Because if they're not aware of their own thoughts and feelings, it's highly likely they're probably not aware of their children's. So we always really tend to start there. And of course, what I often notice is as parents start to become aware, the self-criticism. Oh, I'm so stupid. Why didn't I know that? Why didn't I realise it? Now you said it, it's so obvious to me. Oh, for goodness sake, you know, and that's so, you know, I relate to that because I know that's how I felt when I first started to realise things. So, of course, then what they receive is compassion and non-judgment. And I just normalise that and say, you know, you're not alone in this, you know, and it's, of course, how would you recognise it in yourself and your child if you were never taught this? If you were never made aware of this? And so we really start with self-awareness. And then from there, we focus on what does that parent want to learn, you know? And so it's very much about that individual. And so there's probably a combination there of mindful parenting and mindfulness, depending on...
And it's applied to the particular situation of that parent and their child.
And their children, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's very specific to them. But of course, the skills are all pretty much the same skills. It's just that we talk about it from their perspective. And of course, they can come as mum and dad. I've even had mum, dad and grandma come along, mum, dad and auntie, you know, whatever combination they want to bring is absolutely okay. And then mindful parenting workshops. So they're age-based. Mainly really just to fit in with the neurodevelopment of children, because it is slightly different. So we have mindful parenting of toddlers,
what age range is a toddler?
So that's from birth up to the age of 4, really. And that's now available as a pre-recorded workshop, which is lovely. So parents can join that workshop and access it whenever they want to, and they get to keep it for themselves as well. So that's a new thing that we're offering, and lots of parents have taken that up and seen, you know,
so they can contact you to find out about that.
Yeah, they can contact me to find out about that. And then we have mindful parenting of children, which is children from the age of 4 to 10. That's a 4-week workshop, 2 hours a week, online using Zoom. And in that, we look at what is mindfulness, what is mindful parenting, and then we start to look at the types of skills. So it's more, there is self-awareness in there, but it's more focused on the skills that a mindful parent would use. So there's a lot of, we cover a lot on connection, how to connect with our children, and the types of skills that I would use to connect. And we look at how to set boundaries, always a popular topic, and recognizing that a lot of people struggle with setting boundaries. And we look at things like how to cope with, you know, behavioral issues, sibling issues, praise. I also look at praise as well. How would a parent who's practicing mindfulness, how would we use praise? What's the purpose of it? And we also talk about things like punishment, discipline, consequences, all of the juicy things that parents want to know about. Yeah.
That parents struggle with, actually.
Yeah, that they struggle with, and we use examples from the parents. There's time for discussion and some questions and things. And there's homework between sessions. So parents get to go and practice on their children and in their families and then come back with that.
So one of the things I know about you is that you love to have science-based, evidence-based ways of looking at things. Yeah. So I believe that if you're talking to children, parents of children aged between 4 and 10, you'd be looking at their neurodevelopmental stages too, age appropriate. Yeah.
So what is a child able to do? You know, and understanding expectations, and if I'm not seeing that, you know, is there a particular reason why I'm not seeing it? So very much around understanding that as a parent, you're going to be practicing and practicing and practicing these skills, but your child will only start to use them when their brain is able to use them, and that they won't use them consistently either. And we talk about how do we cope with, you know, when we make mistakes as parents, you know, what do I do when I've shouted, you know, and even though I knew I shouldn't have shouted, but I did. What do I do when I've punished, even though I know that's not what I wanted to do, but I still did it? What do I do with that as a parent? So we talk about that as well, because that's important.
So do you talk about age appropriate behaviours and the expectations that sometimes parents treat their children like little adults, and sometimes they treat their older children like little babies?
Yeah. We talk about what is a child of 8 or 9 able to do from a neurodevelopmental perspective. And then moving on to adolescents. I don't really use, I mean, teenagers is quite a modern word, actually. From a neurodevelopmental perspective, we would talk about adolescents rather than teenagers. And that is from 10, 11 upwards. You know, girls can start puberty from around the age of 10 and a half. And we know that the brain starts to change at around the same time as puberty. It's not exactly the same, but it's around then. So mindful parenting of adolescents is from 10 to 11 upwards. And in that, we very much really focus a lot on the brain, the changes in the brain at this time, and how that impacts on mood and behavior and the way that adolescents interact with us as parents and their peers. And we look at things like social media, gaming, the types of behaviors that adolescents get up to. We look at that as well. Risk taking.
So can I, before we go on to talk about the other workshops, can we just enlarge on this teenage piece?
Yeah.
The adolescents, because what fascinates me about that is, do you have parents saying, I'm coming to you because I seem to have sailed through things, but now I've got an adolescent and now I'm really struggling. Is it too late to begin a mindful parenting approach? If I start now, have I missed the bus?
Yeah, I get that a lot. A lot of parents say that, like, well, surely it's too late. You know, my child is 14 or 15, and is there any point? And the first thing I say to them is, well, how old are you? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I go, well, how old are you? You know, and they go, well, I'm like, you know, 41 or whatever. And I go, well, when did you last learn something new?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Great point.
So we carry on learning. You know, we have this amazing thing in our brain which allows us to carry on learning. Neuroplasticity means our brains keep growing. I mean, we were talking about that at the beginning, weren't we, Helen? How a few months ago, the thought of doing something like this, we both would have been like, okay, not sure about that. And now we don't even think anything of it. So if we can carry on learning and developing and growing and becoming more aware, then of course our children can. And then the second thing I say is, you know, adolescence doesn't finish until about the age of 24, 25. In some boys, it can be more like 26, 27.
And do you find that's a new thought to a lot of parents? Something that they didn't...
I mean, part of them are like, oh, well, thank goodness, I've still got lots of time left. And others are like, are you joking? I've got another 10 years of this. But of course, you know, adolescents, they change. There's differences between early adolescence and later adolescence because the brain is changing all the time. So it's not too late. It's never too late, is it?
Well, you know, the other thing that I'm aware of with adolescents, many years ago, feels like about 2000 back, I worked substantially with adolescents. That was my work. And I recognize that today I simply cannot, because that belonged to the period of time when there were no telephones, there hardly television, no one had the use of social media, there wasn't any gaming. Life was completely different then. So I'm aware that I often, when I'm listening, people come and talk to me, I refer them to, please go and talk with my colleague Jo, because actually you're up to the play.
Yeah.
How on earth have you learned how to be current with adolescents?
Well,
how did you first discover what you need to be working with parents nowadays?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm a little bit of a techno geek as well, Helen, don't you? You know, I do love technology. So, you know, I mean, when my two youngest children, it's quite scary to think that my middle son is a police officer and still an adolescent, actually. But
scary for the public to know.
Yeah, we all say, don't police officers look really young these days? But you know, I think the thing is if you keep talking, if you're curious, I find adolescents will pretty much tell you anything if you approach them from a perspective of curiosity and non-judgment. And I have the benefit of I still support quite a lot of adolescents, so they're great at keeping me updated with what's going on in the world.
Right. So you learn it from the master, so to speak.
I learn it from them, yeah, and they'll tell you they're quite happy because they have no fear that I'm going to judge them or punish them or tell them off. So they'll quite happily tell me. And also, you know, whenever there's a new app come out, I like to download it on my phone, have a look at it. What does it do? I ask, you know, my children, what are these? I've heard this thing. What does it do? So I think you keep up with that. And if you look at Dan Siegel's work, Dr. Dan Siegel, around adolescence, he says something that I really love. He talks about this thing called essence. And essence stands for emotional spark, social engagement, novelty, and creative experience. And what he says is that those are the four key elements of the adolescent mind. You know, that emotional spark. So, you know, going into situations where we get new feelings that are exciting for us, not just staying in our status quo, trying out new things. Social engagement means continuing to, you know, spread our communities and meet new people and talk to people. Novelty is like trying out something new. Even doing this, Helen, we're practicing essence, yeah? And creative exploration, you know, try some, you know, read a book you've never read before, walk somewhere you've never walked before. And what he talks about is that the adolescent brain is going through this period of that he calls essence. But what he also says is, if we as adults continue this in our lives, we actually keep our brains young. So he talks about it, it's like an anti-aging for the brain.
Does that mean that you're a closet gamer, then Jo, or that you have your own?
I'm not so keen on the gaming, but there are things that adolescents do that I enjoy. And I love, you know, I often still read. I say to some of my teenage clients, you know, what books are you reading? Like, who do you follow on Instagram or Twitter? You know, because I want to see what is it they're reading? What are they learning about? Because they are fearless, aren't they, Helen? Yeah. You know? And I love that about them. So I think it's more like I'm a closet adolescent, really, than a closet gay. And music, you know, listen to the music that they listen to.
Yeah. It's like you stay current. So I admire that about you, because I have a recognition that you're current and you understand what's here, what's present for adolescents at the moment. And I'm often curious about how you and I sometimes talking to, because I get to talk to a lot of adolescents too, find out things about them that their parents don't know, because they say the biggest problem is mum and dad don't have the time to listen to me. They go mad at me because I'm always caught up with some kind of social media on a screen or in a game or something. But they say, why don't you have time for the family? But we say to the parents, why is it you don't have time for the kids? That's interesting.
And listen to them. Listen to them without judging them. That's the other big thing, isn't it? Adolescents, as soon as they feel judged, they just stop talking.
Well, the essence of mindfulness, acceptance, isn't it? Acceptance. So I understand then that the way that you do the mindfulness in parenting of age groups is the toddlers group, the children up to 10, and then the adolescents after that. So those are workshops that are current, and they're all on Zoom. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world.
No, you can join in, and you can come back and get a refresher whenever you want as well. So once you've joined the workshop, you're always welcome. And I think pretty much every time I run a workshop, I have parents that have done it before and have gone like, I've come back for a bit of a top up. You know, like how we top up our suntans or we ever go and have our highlights done in our hair or whatever. They come back for the same thing. For a top up.
Okay, so now can you clarify the mindfulness for parents?
So that is, in essence, what we really do as Mindful Me, isn't it? That's about teaching the attitudes and the practice of mindfulness. And really the only difference is that, so I'm still teaching, what the attitudes of mindfulness is. I teach mindfulness meditation, teach informal mindfulness practices as well. The only slight difference is that we teach it very much from a perspective of parenting. So we talk about it from that perspective. So what is it like to practice these things as a parent, in my family, with my children? How do I build in meditation into my life when I've got 3 kids as well? How can I practice non-judgment when I walk into my child's room and it looks like there's been, an explosion? Okay, so the examples that we use are very much from a parenting perspective. And we also talk a lot about how our children can make us aware, how they'll do or say things that trigger us, and how can we bring awareness into that experience. So it's very much about our children as our mindfulness teachers as well. And they're quite relentless, these little mindfulness teachers, aren't they?
Well, it's all a learning curve, isn't it? Working with people. So then let's have a look at the time. Oh yes, we're down to about the last 5 minutes, Jo. Can I ask you, for parents who are listening and people who are keen to understand this, talk about what it's like to nowadays come and receive the help that they need, or make the inquiry they need, or come to the workshop they need, or come to a one-on-one with you, and we can't meet. So what is it like? What is it like online? What's your experience of it? And what can you give as feedback to the parents listening right now? The experiences of parents, how are they working with the difference between online and in person?
Well, it's interesting because I just finished a couple of workshops, and I actually said to the parents, can you give me some feedback? It would be really lovely to hear your feedback. And of course, some of the parents that did attend a session in person previously, and some, this is their first experience of attending a session. And it was all really positive. I mean, parents said, it was really lovely. Jo, you may not have realised, but I was in my pajamas at the workshop, and it was really nice that I didn't have to panic about getting there, that if they're at home and the children wander in, they can just turn their screen off or turn their mic off and deal with whatever's happening and come back to the session. So there's not this worry about having to organise to be able to leave the house for 2 hours. They felt it was a lot more flexible in that way for them. But at the same time, they really felt that they got a lot out of it, and actually that being in their own homes in a place that they felt comfortable, a lot of them said to me, I actually really felt that I went even deeper into my awareness. You know, I wasn't worried about what anybody else was thinking because I was in my own place and I felt really safe there. I have lots of parents who do it, you know, they sit on their beds and do it, or they sit in their gardens and do it, or I always say to people, find a place that you feel comfortable, where you're less likely to be interrupted, conscious of the fact they probably may still be interrupted. You know, bring a cup of tea with you, bring a notepad with you, and it's your experience, and you can ask questions, you can join in the conversations, or you can choose not to. Some parents have joined and they come at the very beginning, they have their screen on, they introduce themselves, and then they turn their video off and they turn their audio off and they sit and listen, and other parents will be very active. And it's okay, it doesn't matter which one you choose. So I think it actually really allows people to make it their personal experience. And they still get to talk to each other. We always start the session with everyone meeting each other. We do, if they want to ask a question, I use the chat on Zoom so people can ask questions during the session. They can send a question to me privately if they don't want everyone else to see it. I can write notes that people want to see as well, and then at the end I send any slides or resources. And for what I have been doing, Helen, for the mindfulness practice workshop, when we practice a meditation in the session, I record just the meditation. Everyone turns their cameras off and I record the meditation, and then I send it to them so they have it and they can use that whenever they want to as well. So that's something extra.
Yeah. So your experience of it, what's it like being your side of the screen and not being face-to-face in a workshop? How have you discovered that's been over the last few months?
Yeah, I think, you know, I thought I would feel quite disconnected. I was a bit worried about that. Would it feel really, you know, would I feel like I'm alone on my own? But I haven't felt that at all. I've actually felt really connected to people. And we often start the sessions 10 minutes. I always say to people, I will be online 10 minutes before it starts. If you want to come on and have a chat, then do. You know, we'll have a chat about, of course, we talk about the weather since I've been in England because it's interesting. And so, you know, I think the you know, that thing we do in mindfulness, when we talk about, we go into the future, we worry about what it's going to be like. I definitely am aware that I had some thoughts about that, but I haven't found that. I found it to be still really feeling like part of the community, and that's a really lovely thing to have.
Lovely, isn't it? And when you think about it, if I was to ask you now, we've been talking to each other for an hour.
I know.
We've got a minute left. Do you notice how present we've been during this last?
Yeah, really present.
So it's been lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you for being open to the questions. Thank you for the education that we will have all received. Thank you for being part of Mindful Me.
Thank
no
you,
matter
Helen.
where you live in the world.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you.
You too.
Lots of love.
Take care. Lots of love from me.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.